I stood by my father's casket, barely hearing the pastor's voice as memories of him kept slipping into my mind. My chest felt tight, and all I wanted was one peaceful moment to say goodbye. But then my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it, but habit made me check. It was an email from my boss. The subject line froze me. Termination notice effective immediately. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My hand shook as I opened it. The message was cold and short, saying I had been underperforming and the company needed someone more aligned with modern expectations. He fired me at my father's funeral. My vision blurred with anger. I felt something inside me break. While I stood there trying to stay upright, I heard quiet whispers behind me. A few coworkers had come to support me, but now I noticed two of them glancing at me with strange smirks, like they already knew. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just bad timing. This was planned. I looked at my father's still face. He had always taught me dignity and strength, but at that moment all I felt was humiliation and rage. Then I saw my phone light up again, this time a message from the office, asking me to come in immediately. Even now. Even here. And that was only the beginning. The moment I stepped away from the casket, the memories of my boss flooded in. He was younger than me by almost 20 years, sharp suit, sharper smile, always pretending to be friendly while treating me like someone outdated. He loved control. Every meeting was a stage, every employee an audience. Over the last year, he made small moves that weakened me, removing me from projects, skipping my recommendations, calling me old school in front of others. He wasn't just a bad boss, he was someone who enjoyed watching people crumble. As I walked toward the entrance for some air, my phone rang again. It was him. I let it ring twice, then forced myself to answer. His voice was flat, almost bored. He asked why I hadn't shown up yet. I reminded him I was at my father's funeral. He said, "I understand, but the company can't pause for personal matters. You need to clear out your things today." I felt the anger rise again, but grief kept me silent. When the call ended, a cold realization hit me. This wasn't random. He wanted to humiliate me, publicly, emotionally, and professionally. And he enjoyed doing it. Just then, my cousin stepped outside and asked why I looked upset. Before I could answer, I saw two colleagues whispering again, watching me. Something dangerous was happening behind the scenes. I returned inside, trying to focus on the ceremony, but my mind spun. My boss had demanded I show up immediately, at my father's funeral. Who does that? For a moment I thought of ignoring him completely, but fear lingered. Losing my job at 50 was frightening. I had bills, a mortgage, and fewer opportunities than when I was younger. Still, I stayed until the end of the service. My father deserved that. But every minute felt like a tightrope between grief and panic. When the guests began leaving, my aunt approached me. She said, "You should go handle your job," she said gently, but her words cut. It felt like she was saying the funeral could wait. I wanted to scream that I had just lost the only man who ever believed in me, but the words stuck in my throat. By the time I reached home, exhaustion hung over me like a cloud. My sibling was waiting there, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Instead of comfort, they simply asked, "So, what are you going to do now?" No warmth, no concern, only judgment. I went to my room, needing silence. On my father's desk, I found a stack of papers. One envelope had my name on it, written in his handwriting. My heart dropped. Why would he leave me a letter? Just as I reached for it, my phone buzzed again, this time from a blocked number. "Your boss is not done with you." At home, I finally opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written weeks before his death. My father explained that he had been making arrangements involving a small business he once co-owned. I didn't even know he still had assets tied to it. The letter said I had been named as a partial controller of his share, and there were instructions about accessing documents and rights I never knew existed. It made no sense. Why wouldn't my father tell me earlier? Why keep this a secret until now? Before I could process it fully, my sibling entered my room without knocking. They saw the letter on the desk and scoffed. "So he left you something again, figures. He always favored you." Their tone was bitter. I stared at them, stunned. Today of all days, they chose jealousy. I tried explaining that I didn't even know what this business was about, but they shrugged. "Well, don't expect me to help. I have my own life to worry about." Their coldness stung. I felt more alone than ever. Later that evening, I got another email, this time from the company's internal system. Somehow, my boss already knew about the business time my father left behind. The message was short: "We need to discuss your conflict of interest." I froze. How did he know? And why did he seem threatened by it?
The next morning, I forced myself out of bed, my father's absence pressing down on me like a physical weight. I couldn't let grief paralyze me. The company's servers didn't care about funerals or my broken heart. They kept running, or they crashed spectacularly. I logged in, scanning the dashboard for issues, my hands shaking. Emails from my colleagues poured in, some polite, some unsure how to approach me after the burial incident. None mentioned the boss's callousness directly. No one wanted to confront it, but I didn't need their words. The words in that email were enough to fuel a fire I didn't even know I had. I opened the routing system, and immediately my stomach knotted. A shipment scheduled for the West Coast had a delayed manifest. A minor glitch, but with enough dominoes lined up, it could cascade into a major catastrophe. I rolled up my sleeves and dug in, manually rerouting cargo, sending urgent messages to the field team. Each keystroke reminded me why they needed me. Not just for the work, but for the knowledge I'd built over years, for the instinct no algorithm could replicate. And yet, my boss had just dismissed me like an expired receipt, ignoring the consequences like they were invisible. I clenched my fists and swore silently. If they wanted to play games, fine. I'd show them exactly how expensive incompetence could be. By mid-afternoon, the office was a tense echo of what it used to be. Empty desks and nervous whispers replaced the familiar hum of focused energy. My colleagues avoided eye contact, as if my termination had poisoned the entire floor. I caught glimpses of them, their faces pale, muttering about delays and errors. I tried to stay focused. One by one, I patched the system errors, rerouted shipments, and manually corrected data entries. Each small victory felt hollow, because the person who had built the network was no longer officially in charge. My boss had stripped me of my authority, yet the operation still demanded my expertise. When the phone rang, I nearly jumped. It was the assistant, her voice tight. "Sir, the West Coast shipments are lagging. Should I contact the new manager?" I paused, my stomach twisting. There wasn't a new manager yet. Only untrained replacements fumbling blindly through protocols I'd spent a decade perfecting. I hung up and stared at the screens, green and red blinking like warning lights in my chest. Every error, every delay was a reminder that my absence could destroy months of planning in hours. Then I noticed something chilling. A notification popped up. A new email from my boss. Subject line, "Meeting 10 a.m. tomorrow. Urgent." I hesitated. Reading it felt like stepping into the lion's den, but curiosity and anger won. I clicked. The meeting was set in the glass conference room overlooking the city. Sunlight streamed in, painting everything gold. But it felt poisonous, like it belonged to someone else. I arrived early, my hands gripping my briefcase like armor. My boss was already there, flanked by two junior managers I barely recognized. They smiled, too wide, too rehearsed. "Glad you could join us," he said, voice syrupy with fake charm. "We need to discuss your transition." Transition. That word tasted like bile. I sat, carefully, keeping my expression neutral. "Transition?" I asked, slow and deliberate. "Yes," he said, leaning back. "We're looking to implement new strategies, streamline operations. You've been invaluable, but, well, you've resisted change." He paused, letting the words hang, like a guillotine above my head. I stayed silent, letting him fill the room with corporate jargon. They didn't understand the weight of what I managed daily, the decisions that kept the entire network from collapsing. I wondered how many disasters would happen before someone realized the human element couldn't be replaced. After 20 minutes of this theater, my boss finally said, "We're offering you a severance package. Consider it amicable." He smiled like he had just delivered a gift. I felt the blood drain from my face. 13 years, my life's work, reduced to a glossy paper packet on a mahogany table. I exhaled slowly, hiding the storm inside. Amicable, I repeated under my breath. They had no idea the storm they'd unleashed. I left the office that day feeling hollow, my father's absence still heavy in my chest. The streets blurred past as I drove, the city alive around me while my world felt frozen. I couldn't let them see my weakness. I had to plan, think, calculate. Back at home, I reviewed the severance offer. 2 weeks. That was it. 2 measly weeks for over a decade of dedication, countless late nights, and sacrifices no one would ever acknowledge. The injustice was suffocating. I opened my personal files, looking for anything I could leverage, anything they had overlooked. My custom workflow scripts, the backup protocols, the operational shortcuts, I realized they were all dependent on my credentials. Without me, the system would flounder. I smiled grimly. Maybe this wasn't just a termination. Maybe it was an opportunity. As night fell, I sat in the dark plotting. I would show them exactly what happens when the cornerstone of an operation is removed, not out of malice, but as a lesson in respect. Tomorrow, the war will begin. And this time, I wouldn't just watch the dominoes fall. I would make sure they did so spectacularly.
The next morning, I returned to the office, not as an employee, but as a strategist with a plan. Every glance from colleagues told me they were unsure where loyalty lay now that the boss had shown his true colors. I kept my head down, logging in as usual, making it look like I was just another man beaten by circumstance. But behind the screens, I moved pieces silently. Scripts, backups, and operational protocols, everything I had perfected over years, were now invisible to anyone but me. If anyone tried to run the system without my credentials, chaos would ensue. Cargo shipments could be delayed, customer orders mismatched, even financial reporting skewed. It wasn't sabotage, it was accountability. Mid-morning, a junior manager called me over, trying to be helpful. "We're having trouble with the northern route," she said, panic in her voice. I leaned over her shoulder, feigning ignorance, and offered vague advice. I could feel the tension building. Every decision they made without understanding the system became another step toward the inevitable domino effect. By lunch, emails were flooding in, delays, questions, minor errors multiplying into larger problems. My boss had thought firing me would be a simple reset. He had no idea the world I'd built depended entirely on the person he had discarded. And as I sipped my coffee, I knew it was only a matter of time before the first real crash happened. Afternoon brought a flurry of activity. I watched as the new managers stumbled through procedures I had automated years ago. Each misstep triggered warning alerts, flashing red across screens like a battlefield map. I could have intervened. I could have saved them the embarrassment, but that would defeat the point. They needed to see what happens when expertise is ignored. Every error, every misrouted shipment, every delayed order was a lesson in humility. My phone buzzed with another email from HR. "We need an update on operational performance." I smiled faintly. They were blind to the storm brewing beneath their feet. By 3 p.m., the system reported its first major failure. A shipment bound for Chicago had no routing data. Panic started spreading. Calls from field agents, emails from clients, and frantic texts from the junior managers made it clear they had no idea how dependent they were on the invisible scaffolding I had built. I leaned back, letting them flail while staying comfortably behind the curtain. In the back of my mind, I could hear my father's voice, reminding me that true respect is earned. Let them learn it the hard way. The dominoes were tipping, one by one, and there was no turning back. By the next morning, chaos had crept into every corner of the office. Staff whispered in hallways, avoiding the conference rooms where my boss had once flaunted his authority. I walked past, neutral expression intact, watching the fear and confusion take root. Emails came at an alarming rate, shipment delays, missing data, clients demanding explanations. My boss had underestimated how much the system relied on my hands-on knowledge. Without me, even the simplest processes required intuition and experience they didn't have. I reviewed the logs quietly, noting which errors had the potential to escalate into catastrophic failures. The strategic operations officer had been out of his depth from day one, but now the numbers proved it. Every miscalculated schedule and delayed approval compounded like interest on a bad debt. A colleague dared to approach me. Do you think it's gonna be okay?" I didn't answer. I simply nodded toward the monitors. It was gonna be okay, just not for him. By 11 a.m., the first major shipment rerouting had failed. Panic set in. Calls were escalated to senior management, and the illusion of control my boss had once boasted about dissolved. And through it all, I stayed calm. I had waited for this moment, and now I watched quietly as the empire of incompetence began to crumble around them.
By lunch, the office had transformed from a corporate hub to a crisis center. Red alerts flashed across screens, calls rang continuously, and managers scrambled with no direction. I moved among them silently, a ghost from their former reality. My boss finally appeared, face pale, striding through the floor like a man realizing the ground beneath him was unstable. "Why is nothing working?" he demanded, voice rising. I didn't answer. Words wouldn't help him now. Actions, or the lack thereof, spoke louder. The system's core dependencies had begun failing one by one. Automated processes stopped, routing calculations went blank, and shipment manifests disappeared. My personal scripts, the ones that made everything function, were invisible to them. Without authorization, nothing could run properly. I could see the panic growing in his eyes. Meetings were called, instructions shouted, but it was too late. Each decision they made only deepened the failures. I leaned against a desk, arms crossed, watching the unraveling. This wasn't revenge, it was justice. 13 years of my life's work deserved respect, and they had shown none. By mid-afternoon, the office was a war zone. Phones rang incessantly. Alerts lit up monitors like fireworks gone wrong, and panic had infected every corner. Managers ran around, each trying to fix what they had no idea how to manage. My boss appeared at my old workspace, hands trembling, voice low. "Mac, you have to fix this." I didn't respond. Fix it? After what he did at my father's funeral? No, not my problem. Not anymore. I had already stepped out of the hierarchy, but my fingerprints were everywhere. Every success they had once taken for granted now depended on my absence. One of the new hires accidentally rerouted a major shipment to the wrong city. The red alert flashed, triggering automated delays and client complaints. My former team tried to correct it, only to compound the issue further.
I leaned against a desk, sipping my coffee, the green glow of the monitors reflecting in my tired eyes. Every failure was a lesson, every error a reminder. Expertise cannot be replaced by arrogance. The lesson was painful, yes, but it was necessary. By 3 p.m., the office had descended into organized chaos, and I realized the moment had finally come, the tipping point where incompetence collided with consequence. The first board-level panic call came around 3:30 p.m. I watched from a distance, my hands folded, as the CEO's voice bellowed down the line, demanding explanations. Managers tried to speak, stumbling over facts and half-truths, clearly unprepared for the storm they had unleashed. Emails poured in from clients demanding immediate action, shipments delayed, logistics mismanaged, revenue projections collapsing by the hour. And still, my scripts, the ones nobody understood, remained the silent gatekeepers of order. Without me, nothing worked. One by one, the managers attempted to access the system. "I don't understand why it's not functioning," they shouted, clicking buttons, refreshing screens, trying everything but the one thing that mattered: experience. I could hear my father's voice, steady and firm in my memory, reminding me that patience and strategy are worth more than blind anger. I let the chaos breathe, watched the dominoes fall. Each failure was a piece of accountability, a tangible reminder that respect for expertise cannot be ignored. By 4 p.m., the magnitude of the disaster hit the office. Calls escalated to external auditors, clients threatened contract termination, and the company's credibility teetered on the edge. The lesson was clear: they had fired the wrong person. By late afternoon, the air was thick with tension. Managers ran from desk to desk, trying to coordinate, shouting into phones, but nothing stuck. The system had become a labyrinth of errors, each problem feeding the next. I observed quietly, a ghost in my former domain. My boss appeared again, sweat glistening on his forehead. "Mac, you must understand we didn't—" I cut him off mentally. Understand? He had demonstrated his lack of understanding vividly the previous week, the day of my father's funeral. Actions, not excuses, were what mattered. I watched a critical shipping manifest fail. Packages intended for multiple clients vanished from the system entirely. A junior employee nearly collapsed, overwhelmed by the cascading errors. I shook my head, quietly grateful no one had the faintest clue how intertwined the operations were with my personal scripts. By 5 p.m., it was no longer a question of mistakes. It was structural collapse. Orders missing, routes scrambled, financial data incomplete. I could almost see the dollar signs evaporating in real time. I poured myself another coffee, taking it slow. Revenge wasn't about petty destruction. It was about teaching lessons that couldn't be ignored. And as I leaned back in my chair, the weight of 13 years of experience shone brighter than any title they had ever bestowed on me. The evening brought media attention. By 6 p.m., news alerts popped up on my phone. Major shipping delays at Thompson Logistics, clients frustrated, CEO under fire. I smiled faintly. The ripple effects had left the office but hadn't reached my hands.
It was pure, unsoiled consequence. The CEO, once so arrogant, was scrambling, appearing in video calls with clients while behind him subordinates typed frantic emails to undo problems they didn't understand. My boss had underestimated how much his empire depended on one person, the very person he had humiliated during my father's funeral. I walked past the monitors, watching red warnings blink across the system. Every failure was precise, measured, no chaos beyond what their negligence had caused. I wasn't angry, I was methodical. They had shown disrespect, and now they were paying in real time. By 8 p.m., external auditors had joined the calls. Questions, all pointing to missing logs, failed protocols, and operational blind spots. I leaned back in the chair that I had borrowed years ago, a small grin forming. They were finally learning what experience meant. And in the quiet moments, sipping my coffee and watching the storm unfold, I knew this lesson would leave a mark they'd never forget. By the next morning, the office resembled a battlefield. Coffee cups scattered, paper strewn across desks, and exhausted employees tried desperately to regain control. I watched from a distance, savoring the irony. Every moment of their panic was earned, a direct result of the hubris that had led them to fire me. The CEO's calls had multiplied. "Mac, please, you have to come back," he pleaded over one of the video lines. I let it ring. No, not my circus, not my monkeys. They had underestimated me, and now they were paying the price. One of the new managers attempted to manually override a critical delivery schedule, and I could almost see the gears of the system grind to a halt. Alerts screamed at them like a warning they refused to heed. Their confidence, once inflated, now dissolved into confusion and fear. I walked outside for fresh air, the morning chill grounding me. The sun was rising over the city, painting everything gold. For 13 years, I had been invisible, the quiet guardian of an empire that never appreciated me. Today, they were learning firsthand that competence cannot be replaced by arrogance, and disrespect carries consequences. By lunch, the chaos had reached upper management. Clients were threatening lawsuits. The company's reputation teetered on a knife's edge. And all I had done was step aside and let reality speak.
Around noon, I received a message from my old team. "Mac, what do we do?" Kevin typed. I smiled privately. They were finally looking for guidance. Too late to prevent disaster, but just in time to witness accountability. I didn't reply immediately. Watching them flounder was necessary. Every missed shipment, every failed protocol, every confused manager reinforced the lesson. Experience matters, titles don't. They had ignored expertise, and now they were living the consequences. By 1 p.m., the CEO called again, more frantic than ever. "You need to come back. The system is failing completely." I considered the offer. I could return, save the day, receive accolades, maybe even regain some authority. But pride and justice kept me away. They needed to learn that actions have weight. Meanwhile, the new team continued to mismanage everything. Packages rerouted, customer complaints skyrocketing, and every error amplified the fallout. The red lights on the monitors were relentless. I sipped my coffee slowly, enjoying the view. Finally, I typed a single message to Kevin. "Hold the fort as best you can. Don't touch my scripts. Let them learn." He hesitated but obeyed. By letting the system act, I ensured the lesson was unavoidable. By late afternoon, external media had picked up the story. Headlines screamed, "Major logistics collapse at Thompson Industries. CEO scrambles as clients lose faith." I leaned back, letting the words sink in. The world was finally seeing what had always been invisible to insiders, the fragility of their operation without skilled hands. The CEO was in meetings that went nowhere, with managers making excuses they knew were hollow. The company's stock dropped slightly, minor but symbolic. They had built an empire, but one key person's absence exposed how thin that foundation really was. Meanwhile, I updated LinkedIn with a single post, available for consultation, operations and legacy system expertise. Within the hour, my phone buzzed with inquiries. Competitors recognized the talent they had so carelessly dismissed. Even as I watched their downfall unfold, I remained composed. Revenge wasn't about rage, it was about letting the consequences of poor decisions play out, perfectly timed. By evening, the office had descended into controlled chaos. Managers yelled, employees panicked, and the CEO's voice could barely be heard over the cacophony. I poured myself another coffee, enjoying the quiet outside while watching them flounder inside. Night fell, and the office lights burned like a warning beacon. The CEO, pale and exhausted, made another desperate plea. "Mac, please, the auditors, everything, you have to come back." I let the call go to voicemail. Today, the lesson was theirs to live. Meanwhile, my old team struggled with the system. Every red alert on the monitors felt like a personal validation, a recognition of expertise ignored. Employees whispered in corners, guilt mixing with frustration. Some had begun to understand just how essential I had been. From a distance, I watched,
calm and collected. I could feel the weight of 13 years of loyalty and sacrifice radiating through the office chaos. Every misstep, every failure, every frustrated call to IT reflected precisely what I had always known. Competence cannot be replaced by arrogance. By 11 p.m., even the CEO's calls had dwindled. Exhaustion had set in. I finally set down my coffee, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. This was more than revenge. It was proof that respect and skill cannot be ignored without consequence. The night was silent outside, but inside, chaos reigned. And I knew, deep down, that when the sun rose, the lessons of the day would remain. Permanent, indelible, unforgettable. The following morning, news alerts flooded my phone. Major clients had pulled contracts. Stockholders demanded explanations. Upper management scrambled like ants disturbed by a storm. I smiled quietly. They had built an empire, but one key person's absence exposed how thin that foundation really was. My phone buzzed again, this time with a message from my competitor. "We've heard what happened. Interested in a consultation." Within minutes, I was on the line with someone who understood my value instantly. 2.5 times my previous salary, full autonomy, complete trust. I leaned back, realizing that respect and compensation followed those who earned it. Meanwhile, at the office, the CEO was facing the board. Their discussions were frantic, defensive, and futile. Every red light, every delayed shipment, every angry client report reflected the same truth. They had fired the wrong person at the wrong time. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had been loyal, dedicated, and professional for 13 years, fired at the funeral of my father the moment I was most vulnerable, and now they were powerless. Sometimes I thought about stepping in, saving the day, reclaiming my former role. But pride and justice kept me away. Let them learn. By afternoon, the office was a war zone. Managers shouted, employees panicked, systems malfunctioned. Kevin and a few loyal team members struggled to maintain even minimal operations. Every time a client called, their frustration was palpable. Meanwhile, my competitor finalized the contract. I would oversee operations at their company, implementing the systems I had perfected over years: autonomy, respect, and real influence. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Justice had a way of rewarding skill. The CEO called again, pleading, "Mac, we'll give you anything, return." I let it go to voicemail. Actions have consequences. They had learned the hard way. Evening came, and I watched from home as news reports detailed the chaos inside the company. Headlines screamed about incompetence and poor management decisions. I sipped my coffee, reflecting on everything that had led here. Sometimes revenge isn't dramatic. It's quiet, precise, and unavoidable. I had provided the ultimate lesson in humility, timing, and respect. And now, I was free. If this story hit you the way it hit me, don't leave without supporting the channel. Smash that like button so more people can hear stories just like this. Drop a comment telling me what you would have done in my shoes. I read every single one. And if you love real revenge, corporate justice, and stories where karma actually shows up, then subscribe right now. It costs nothing, but it helps the channel more than you know.